I thought I was looking at a log. Just a dark, soaked figure caught between two rocks. But then it moved. And the sound that came from it, it wasn't human, but it wasn't just an animal's cry either. It was fear, pain, panic, all wrapped in one howl that echoed down the valley. I didn't think. I just ran. The water was deeper than I expected. The current nearly took my legs out from under me. But I kept pushing through. The figure was thrashing now, one paw clawing at the mud, the other slipping beneath the surface again and again. When I got closer, I saw the eyes. Wide, wild, brown, and full of terror. It was a bear, a fully grown brown bear, and she was drowning. I'm not a fool. I know what a wild bear can do. But this wasn't a predator. Not now. She was stuck, wedged between a fallen tree and a ledge of stone. Her front paw looked twisted. She was panicking. She would die if I didn't do something now. I threw myself forward, half swimming, half falling, until I could grab onto the tree. I used it to anchor myself and edged closer to her. Her head swung toward me, teeth bared. She growled. My heart was ready to burst out of my ribs. But she didn't strike. I reached out slowly, talking to her like I would to a spooked horse. Easy, easy girl. You're okay. I got you. I hooked my arm under one of her front legs, my other arm bracing against the tree. She was slippery, heavy as hell. Every time I tried to lift, her body twisted and pulled us both deeper. I lost count how many times I nearly went under. At some point, I got my footing on a submerged boulder. I used all my strength to pivot her out of the gap. She slid forward in a surge of water, nearly taking me with her. We both landed in the shallows, soaked, coughing, gasping. She didn't move right away. Just lay there, sides heaving, eyes half-lidded. I backed off, giving her space, heart still racing. Then she started to shake. At first, I thought it was from the cold, but her breathing turned ragged. She rolled onto her side and let out a noise, low, almost like a groan. Her body began to convulse. That's when I noticed the blood, not from a wound, from beneath her. No way. I took a step closer, cautiously, and then I saw it. Her belly was swollen, too swollen, and her hind legs were twitching in rhythm with the spasms. It hit me like a truck. She wasn't dying. She was giving birth. Right there, on the muddy shore, minutes after nearly drowning. I froze. I didn't know what the hell to do. My training never covered this. And part of me wanted to run, to get out of there before instincts kicked in, and she remembered I was just another man in her forest. But I didn't move. I couldn't. I watched as her body clenched, her mouth wide in a silent cry. The first cub came fast, still in its sack. She barely had the strength to turn. She licked it clean, weakly, but didn't lift her head again. I crouched behind a bush, trembling. Every instinct screamed danger. But something else rooted me there. Something heavier than fear. I couldn't look away. This wasn't just nature. This was something else. Something ancient. Raw. Sacred. The wind picked up. A branch cracked behind me. I spun, ready for another threat. But it was just a bird, startled. When I looked back, the bear was still, chest rising and falling in uneven bursts. The cub twitched beside her, small and blind, nuzzling instinctively. I whispered under my breath, "What the hell just happened?" I kept low behind the shrubs, hands still shaking, my boots soaked through and body freezing, but I couldn't feel any of it. My eyes were locked on her. She hadn't moved for at least a minute. The cub she had just birthed squirmed blindly against her side. I wanted to help. God, I did. But what was I supposed to do? She was a wild animal, a force of nature, even now when she looked more like a breathing corpse than a predator. I kept telling myself to stay put. Don't interfere. Let nature do its thing. Then came the second groan. She wasn't done. She lifted her head weakly, eyes dull and unfocused. Her body tensed again. Another ripple of pain surged through her. Her paws dug into the mud, and she let out a low growl, not at me, but at the world. I looked over my shoulder. The trees behind me rustled. A sharp bark in the distance. My stomach tightened. Wolves. I knew that sound too well. They must have caught the scent. I crouched lower, unstrapped the rifle slung across my back, and clicked the safety off. I didn't want to use it. Not unless I had to. But if they came any closer, I'd have no choice. She cried out again. Her muscles convulsed. I saw the second cub crown. God, it was so small. Smaller than I expected. Her body was doing everything it could to bring it into the world, but she was losing strength fast. Her chest rose and fell in desperate jerks. I could hear each breath as if it were my own. The cub slid free. She didn't move to clean this one. I stood up slowly, watching for any sign she might react. Nothing. Her eyes were half shut, and her sides barely moved. The tiny bundle lay motionless. I stepped out from the brush, slowly, like I was walking through a minefield. Each step made my heart thump louder. One wrong move, and she could lunge. Or die. 5 feet away now. Still no reaction. I crouched, reaching into the pouch on my belt, pulling out the thick green cloth I always carried. I laid it gently over the wet cub, not touching it directly, just trying to keep it from the cold. She opened her eyes. Our eyes met. I couldn't breathe, but she didn't growl, didn't bare her teeth. She just watched me. I don't know what passed between us in that moment, but it felt like something ancient recognized something human. I backed away, step by step, until I was behind the shrubs again. She made one attempt to lift her head, but failed. Her breathing became shallow, uneven. A wet cough rumbled in her throat. Then the third wave came. Her body jerked violently, mud splashing around her. I saw the strain in every muscle. It lasted longer this time. She groaned, more guttural now. The pain was taking over. Third cub. It took longer. It came out slow, inch by inch. I watched helplessly, wanting to run forward but afraid of doing more harm. When it finally emerged, she didn't move. Not even a twitch. All 3 cubs now lay beside her, 2 of them moving weakly, the third still slick with birth and unmoving. I kept my eyes on the treeline. That bark I'd heard earlier was closer now. My pulse jumped. I scanned the shadows. Another bark. And then, a silhouette. Just at the edge of the trees. Low to the ground. Watching. A wolf. Not a big one. Maybe a scout. But where there's one, there's more. I lifted the rifle, keeping it aimed at the ground. I wasn't about to shoot unless I had no other choice. Behind me, the cubs whimpered. The wolf didn't advance. It just stood there, head low, ears perked, judging the situation. I fired a warning shot into the dirt. The sound ripped through the air. The wolf bolted. Silence returned, except for the soft cries of new life beside a dying mother. And I stood there, frozen, unsure if I had just saved them or delayed the inevitable. For a long moment, nothing moved. No wolves, no wind. Not even the birds dared to speak after that shot. I lowered the rifle, chest heaving. My knuckles were white from gripping it so tight. The cubs whimpered again. One of them gave a thin, wet cry. I turned slowly. She was still breathing, but barely. Her eyes were glazed, half-lidded. Her massive frame rose and fell in short, shallow movements. The blood beneath her had turned the mud dark. I knew that color too well. She was fading, and I was alone with 3 newborn lives. A part of me screamed to leave, to walk away before the pack returned, before she lashed out in a last burst of instinct. But I didn't move. I couldn't. I had crossed some invisible line, and there was no way back. One of the cubs, the one I had covered earlier, was moving, twitching, mewling. The second, the smallest, barely lifted its head. The third, the one that came last, lay still. No movement, no sound. I crept forward, slow as the rising sun. She didn't react. I dropped to my knees in the mud beside the cubs, heart racing. I pulled the cloth back from the first 2, then gently picked up the third using a corner of my jacket. It was so light, too light. I held it close to my face, trying to feel breath. Nothing. I rubbed its sides, gently at first, then a bit more firmly. Come on, little one. Still nothing. I looked at her. Her eyes were open now, just barely. Watching. She saw me holding her cub, and then she blinked. A slow, deliberate blink. I don't know why, but that broke something in me. I bent over the cub and started rubbing harder, whispering nonsense. You're okay. You're not done. Not today. And then, a twitch. A flicker in one paw. Then a gasp. It was weak, but it was life. I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding and gently laid the cub beside its siblings. I pulled out the dried backup cloth from my pack and covered all 3, careful to keep them close to her belly. She tried to lift her head again. Couldn't. I unzipped my jacket and pulled out a folded piece of emergency foil blanket. It wasn't much, but it reflected heat. I draped it over her upper body and the cubs, hoping to trap what warmth remained. Still she watched me, her pupils locked to mine, not in fear, not even in pain anymore. Just awareness. Like she knew. She let out a long, low breath. Not a growl, not a groan, just a sound of surrender. I sat down next to her, the mud soaking through my pants. It didn't matter. Time moved differently in that moment. I wasn't a ranger. I wasn't even human. I was just another living thing trying to keep something else alive. Minutes passed. The sun dipped lower. Shadows stretched across the clearing. The air chilled. I built a small fire, just a few twigs and a spark, far enough not to spook her, but close enough for heat. I watched the smoke drift upward, thin and blue. The cubs moved in their sleep. One let out a sharp squeak. She flinched, tried again to lift her head. This time she managed it. She turned slowly toward them, then toward me. Her nose twitched. I stayed still. Then, with effort, she reached out and pulled the cloth closer to her with one paw. And I knew she wasn't done yet. She was choosing to stay. That night, I didn't go home. I stayed right there, the fire crackling, my rifle across my knees, eyes scanning the dark, waiting to see if dawn would come for all of us. The fire crackled softly through the night, throwing flickers of light across the mud, the fur, and the wet leaves around us. I sat with my back against a tree trunk, rifle across my lap, too wired to sleep, too afraid to move. My knees ached from the cold, and my shoulders were stiff from tension. I hadn't blinked in what felt like hours. She hadn't shifted in hours. Her side still moved, slow and uneven. Her head rested against the earth, muzzle streaked with dirt and blood. The cubs squeaked every now and then, wriggling beneath the folds of cloth I had tucked around them. Their blind determination to find warmth, to find her, kept them alive. That same instinct kept me sitting right there, barely breathing. They kept pushing themselves toward her warmth, those blind little bodies refusing to give up. I envied that kind of certainty. All I had was doubt, fear, and a gnawing sense of helplessness that threatened to crack me open. I checked the tree line again. Nothing but blackness. The wolf hadn't come back, yet. But I wasn't counting on peace to last. I kept thinking of that silhouette, those watching eyes. I had to stay sharp. If anything moved, I'd have to be faster. Quicker. Colder. My breath fogged in the cool air. I glanced at my watch. Just after 4. Time was crawling. I felt like I'd lived 3 days in the last few hours. At one point, I got up, moved slowly around the edge of the clearing to the stream a dozen yards away. I filled my canteen and came back just as slow. Every step felt like it might break the spell. I kept my head on a swivel, rifle ready, praying I wouldn't see another shadow in the woods. When I returned, I poured some water into the shallow plastic lid from my pack and placed it near her head. I didn't expect her to drink, but I had to try. I had to do something. Anything. She didn't react. Not even a twitch. It scared me more than any growl would have. I took a swig for myself and settled back down, arms crossed over my chest, eyes never leaving her. The fire popped. An owl hooted somewhere behind me. The world kept moving, even though everything here felt frozen in place. Hours passed. The sky lightened to a dull gray. Fog settled low, curling between the trees like smoke. The shapes around me became less menacing, more familiar, but the tension in my body didn't ease. She stirred, just a twitch in her back leg. Then another. Her nose moved slightly. The cubs pressed closer at the same moment, their tiny voices lifting into the morning. That sound broke something open in me. A tiny hope. She blinked. It was the first time she had done that since I laid the foil blanket over her. She turned her head an inch, sniffed the air. I held my breath, heart pounding. Come on, girl. Come back to us. Then, slow as stone shifting, she lifted it. I sat up straighter, not daring to breathe. Every muscle in my body froze in place. Her eyes scanned the clearing, pupils adjusting to the new light. Then they found me. We stared at each other again, just like we had the night before. Only this time, she wasn't bleeding. She wasn't panting. She was aware. She shifted her paw, pulling it closer. Tried to push up with it. Failed. Tried again. I could see her ribs strain with effort. With a groan, she rose halfway, swaying a little, but staying upright. One cub crawled out from beneath the cloth and bumped into her chest. She nudged it back gently with her snout, almost lovingly. That small act made my throat tighten. Then she turned and looked at me again. I stood up slowly, hands down at my sides, no sudden movements. My legs were numb, but I managed to steady myself. She took one shaky step forward. My fingers tightened around the rifle strap. I wasn't sure what to expect. Maybe she was disoriented. Maybe she'd suddenly remember that I was a man, and men had hurt her kind before. Maybe this would be the moment everything unraveled. Another step. Then she stopped, no more than 6 feet from where I stood. Her nose twitched. She looked at the fire, at the spot where I'd slept, at the cloth over her cubs. Every glance felt deliberate, calculated. She was making sense of it all. And then she let out a sound I didn't expect. A low, breathy huff. Not a warning, not a threat. It sounded like gratitude. Or maybe that was just me, projecting something human onto something wild. But I needed to believe it meant something. Either way, she didn't attack. She turned back to her cubs, lowered herself carefully, and lay beside them. They scrambled over her instantly, pawing at her belly, searching. Their instincts were stronger than fear. She let them nurse. I stood there a long while, not moving, barely blinking. My body relaxed by inches. When the sun finally crested the trees and gold spilled across the clearing, I knew she would live. We both would. I knelt and added a few more branches to the fire, feeding it slowly, letting the warmth build again. My hands were trembling, not from fear this time, but from something deeper, release. A weight I hadn't known I was carrying had finally begun to lift. I poured more water into the lid. This time, she leaned forward and drank. Just a few sips, but it was enough to bring tears to my eyes. Afterward, I sat back down against the tree. Exhaustion hit me like a wave. My body felt heavy, like I'd aged 10 years in one night. But I couldn't close my eyes. Not yet. The cubs had finished nursing and were curled into her side, small lumps of fur barely moving. She nudged each one with her snout, checking, adjusting, protecting. She was a mother again, and I was just a witness to a miracle that didn't need me anymore. But I stayed anyway. The second morning came warm and still. No wind, no birdsong, just the soft suckling of cubs and the crackle of dying coals. I watched her from a short distance as the sunlight filtered down through the trees and painted golden streaks across the mud. Her fur caught the light in places where it had dried. She looked stronger now. Not whole, not yet, but returning. She had eaten nothing since I found her. But the cubs were feeding, and she was alert, breathing more evenly. I offered her water again. This time, she drank all of it. By midday, she tried to stand. It took 3 tries. The first time, her legs buckled, and she slumped into the earth with a heavy grunt. The second time, she rose a few inches and froze, swaying. But on the third try, she stood. Just for a moment. But she stood. I held my breath. The cubs mewed in protest, losing contact with her body. She quickly lowered herself again, and they latched on once more. She was still nursing them, still giving everything she had. The day passed slowly. I didn't move far. I checked the area again, walked a perimeter, laid a few sticks to signal any fresh tracks. Nothing came near. And then, just as the sun began to dip behind the ridge, she stood again. This time, she stayed up. The cubs stumbled at her feet, confused and clumsy. One rolled over on its back, paws kicking at the air. She nudged it upright with her snout. I didn't move. I couldn't. She turned toward the woods. Then, slowly, she looked back at me. I thought she might growl or run, but she didn't. She just looked. It wasn't like the other times. There was something different in it now. Something calm, clear. She looked at me like she knew exactly who I was. Like she was marking my face, remembering it, trusting it. And then she turned and began to walk. The cubs followed, awkward and slow, stumbling after her through the leaves. One lagged behind. She waited. When it caught up, she pushed forward again, deeper into the trees. I stood frozen long after they vanished. I listened to the rustle of undergrowth until even that was gone. And then it was just me again. Just me. I stayed another hour, maybe 2. Packed up my things. Buried the fire. Gathered the cloths. I left the water lid there, though. I don't know why. Walking back to the station felt strange. Like leaving a place that wasn't part of the world anymore. I kept expecting to see her around each bend, but she was gone. When I got back, I didn't tell anyone. What would I even say? That I helped a bear give birth? That I stayed the night in the forest protecting cubs with a rifle in one hand and my soul in the other? No one would believe it. And somehow, it didn't feel like mine to share. I checked the trail cams a few days later. Most showed the usual: deer, raccoons, a fox. But one, the one near the stream, caught my breath. She was there, alone. She sniffed the air, walked to the place where the fire had been, sat for a moment. Then she turned and left. She was thinner, looked tired, but alive. The cubs weren't with her. I told myself they were hidden, tucked somewhere safe. A week later, I left a fish by the river. Just one, fresh caught, laid carefully in the spot where she'd nursed them. The next day, it was gone. No tracks, no camera trigger, just gone. So I did it again the next week. And the week after that. I never saw who took it, but every time, it disappeared. Sometimes I left too, just in case. Last week, I sat on the same log where I had watched her fight for life. I waited with my thermos and rifle, just in case. The fish was at my feet. I thought maybe it would stay there this time. Maybe she was gone for good. But then I heard it. A branch snapped. Soft. Careful. I turned slowly, not moving anything but my eyes. Behind the brush, just at the edge of the clearing, I saw her. And beside her, 3 small shadows. She didn't step out. She didn't come closer. She just watched. And I sat there, not saying a word. The fish disappeared. So did they. And I'm still sitting here, wondering if next week she'll come again.